I've been seeing them for most of my life, but the first time I remember asking my grandpa about them, I guess I was about 4 or 5. "Grandpa, what's that thing hanging off the fence?" Grandpa looked, and it was kind of weird, seeing his face fall like that. I've seen Grandpa stare down a mad bull more times than I could count. And when the man in rags had been living in the barn, Grandpa had run him off without even raising his voice. However, something about that thing that was hanging on the fence really scared him. "That is a Mucklow." "What's a Mucklow?" I asked, probably butchering it. This would have normally gotten a laugh out of my grandpa, but not today. Today he just stared at the little knot made out of sticks and leather bindings, like it was a declaration of war. "I'm not really sure, sweetie, but my grandpa always told me they were a warning and that I was never to go anywhere near them when I saw them." "But who are they a warning from?" Grandpa was quiet for a minute, seeming to try to find the right answer, and without my realizing it, he was starting to back towards the house and away from the Mucklows in the back pasture. "I don't know, sweetie, but I know what my grandpa told me, and I've always believed him. He told me that the Mucklow were warnings from the creatures that lived in the woods." "Like monsters?" I cut in. No, darling, there are no monsters in the woods. What lives in the woods is just something old. It was there before we were, and it still considers this to be its land. It's always lived in relative peace with us, but sometimes it hangs those symbols to let us know that it's conducting business or having a meeting or just doesn't want to be messed with. If you see those symbols, you must never go anywhere near them." We walked back through the field towards Grandpa's house, the cows mooing around us placidly, and I had enough time to think about it as we walked. I'd never been unwelcome in any part of the farm, but there were places that Grandpa said were dangerous. Some places were dangerous if you didn't have a grown-up, like the fishing pond or the hayloft. Some places were dangerous because of wild animals, like the forest or the boar pen, where Grandpa kept the big hogs. Those all made sense, but this was different. This felt like magic, and I don't know any little girl who doesn't like magic. "What will happen if I go over there?" I asked, remembering stories about people being transported by fairies to strange worlds or coming back to find that 1,000 years had passed. Grandpa turned me to look at him, getting very close so I could see how serious he was, and his eyes were absolutely without happiness or mirth for the first time that I could ever remember. "You would die, baby girl. It's important that you know that those things will kill you, and I'd be very sorry to lose you. You have to promise me that you will never go beyond those signals. Do you understand?" As I sat there and looked into his eyes, I could tell that he was absolutely serious. Grandpa liked to play jokes sometimes, but today was not going to be one of them. Grandpa was afraid that something would happen to me, and I nodded as I told him that I would never go there if I saw the signs. That seemed to make him feel better, and he sighed happily as he walked towards the house. "Now then, let's go see if your grandma's made any cookies." That was the first time I remember hearing about the strange little symbols, but it wasn't the last time I ever saw one. I've lived with my grandparents since I was about 2 years old. My dad was gone before I was even born, and my mom had gotten herself into some trouble with a new boyfriend just after I was born. Mom liked to use drugs, of a kind that my grandmother was never very open about, and when the police caught her with them, they had taken her away and taken me to foster care. Her new boyfriend was nowhere to be found, but Grandma and Grandpa were more than happy to take in their wayward grandchild. Grandma and Grandpa had a big farm down in Tennessee. They raised cows and sheep, a few goats, and some pigs, and Grandpa even raised boars that he would let people hunt for a fee. They did all right, and I can remember many happy years spent on the farm. They never spoiled me, but they were never cruel to me either. For all intents and purposes, I was their daughter, and they brought me up in the same way they had brought my mother up, though I like to hope the results will be strikingly different. After that day, I began to look a little closer at the symbols that were sometimes found around the farm. They were these little Celtic knots that had been woven out of plant fibers and sticks, and sometimes even the hair of the animals. They were always gone a day later, and I don't think I ever saw one that was up for longer than 24 hours. They didn't just appear on the fence either. I remember one morning, Grandpa and I were walking to the cowshed to milk the cows when we came across one of the doors to the barn. Grandpa looked at me, and the message was clear. I didn't go near that barn for the rest of the day, and when I came out of the field that afternoon from picking flowers, I noticed that the sigil was gone. I was never afraid of the little symbols, but I was careful around them. It was like the snakes that sometimes slithered in on hot summer days that you could find in the cow fields. I never went in fear of them. Grandpa said that wouldn't do, but I was careful of them, and that's exactly how I was around whatever made the Mucklows. I was careful. I obeyed Grandpa, at least until I was about 9 years old. One day, while I was out playing in the barnyard, I found another one of those symbols on the door to the old cowshed. The old cowshed was more of a barn than a shed, and I knew there was a way to get into the loft above it without being seen. I was 9 and very curious, and I really wanted to know what those mysterious things were. I looked around to make sure that no one could see me, and then I made my way around the back and onto the small barrel that sat at the back of the shed. If I stood on it, and nobody had bothered to drain it, I could go right up into the top of the shed, and I felt pretty smart as I did it. I was going to find out what these little things were before anybody else, and I couldn't help but grin as I slid into the dark rafters of the building. My shoulders ached as I lifted myself up into the rafters and pulled myself along the narrow beam that stretched across the length of the shed. It had probably been used to roost chickens at one point or another, but now it made a great way for me to move unseen inside the barn. The board was lightly speckled with old droppings, and I was sure that I was leaving a trail of dust behind me as I went. The board was between the roof slats and the tin roof, so I had to army crawl my way across it. I listened for the slightest sounds from below. I had expected to hear weird gibberish or even maybe screaming, but really it was just the strange crunching sounds of someone chewing hard candy or eating rock candy. There was another sound too, something I couldn't quite place, but the closer I got to the middle, the more I began to realize it was the sound of fearful squeaking. It sounded like someone was chasing rats or something, and it made my skin crawl the longer it went on. As I came to the area in the middle, a little expanse between the roof beams, I looked down into the dark shed and tried to find the source of those noises. Even at midday, the old cowshed was pretty dark, and there was only one window towards the back. It wasn't bringing in a lot of light that day. As my eyes grew accustomed to the lack of light, I saw something down in the old hay, and it wasn't what I had expected. I could see something small and furry moving amidst the old hay down there, but it wasn't until one of them broke the surface that I realized those were the rats they had been hunting. One of them came up out of the hay like some kind of shark from the water, and even after having seen it, it's still something that's hard to describe. The closest I can come to is that it looks like a potato with teeth. Not like a regular potato, like a normal-looking spud, but like one of those potatoes that you see at the high-end restaurants, the one that's about the size of a double fist. It had a mouth full of bent-looking teeth, and as it shook the rat that it had in its mouth, I could hear the poor creature screaming as it writhed in pain. It was really tearing it to pieces, shaking it from side to side, and as the gore flew, I saw it let go for a moment so it could chew at the rat's innards as it drug it out. The rat tried to escape, maybe figuring that now was the time to get away, but suddenly the thing turned and bit it again, digging its teeth in as it dragged out another mouthful of meat. From my vantage point, I could see others too, little potato things that circled around in the hay. There had to be at least a dozen of them, and I think that realization was maybe what told me I was in trouble. They weren't very large, maybe twice as large as the rats they were eating, but there were so many of them that they'd probably pull me down like piranhas in a stream. Suddenly I knew I had to get out of here before they resurfaced, and I began to make my way back slowly and meticulously. I was combat crawling, slow work to be sure, but when the board creaked beneath me, I realized I hadn't been going slow enough. I could hear their chittering stop below me, and I didn't need to see them looking at me to know that they were all down there, glancing up to see what was waiting in the rafters for them. It's strange to realize that you're the subject of interest for predators, and I could feel the sweat dripping off of me as I did my best to stay completely still. It was the same feeling I got when I lay under my covers and just knew that there was a monster hiding in the closet. These things sounded ridiculous to an adult, but when you're a kid, you just know that there's monsters waiting for you on some kind of instinctual level. You just know there's a troll or a dragon waiting to gobble you up if you go too far from home. Childhood is strange like that, and this moment was no stranger than any of the rest of it. They were staring at me for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, before they went back to whatever they had been doing and left me to my own devices. I had to force myself to slow crawl on the way out, not daring to go very fast, and when my foot finally found the edge of the rafter beam, I was free to pull myself back to the ground, breathing a sigh of relief and knowing that I was safe once again. That relief lasted until I turned around to find my grandpa standing there, watching my descent from the rafters. I had expected him to be angry. I had broken the rules after all. But to my surprise, he just wrapped me in a hug and said that he was glad I hadn't been hurt. I felt him crying against my shoulder, and I think that's how I realized how much danger I had been in. If my stoic of a grandfather was openly crying, then I could have very well been on death's door in that cowshed. I started to ask him what they were and what was going on, but he just put a finger to my lips and told me to come with him. Silent as we could, we went back to the house, and there he told me what he knew. When I saw that Mucklow and couldn't find you, I just knew that you'd gone into the cowshed despite what I'd told you. I can't be that mad about it. I know that children are curious, like I was curious when I was your age. Grandpa, did you see them too? He nodded slowly, like he was sharing some deep secret. I saw them once, when I was very young. I was about your age, maybe a little older. It was an early morning, and I had been sent out to milk the cows. I was heading out there with my bucket when I saw their symbol and knew that they were in there. It was the same cowshed that you just snuck into, and like you, I wanted to know what they were and why my dad was so afraid of them. I was a little taller than you, so instead of climbing into the roof, I hopped up on a barrel and looked through the window. I expected to see fairies or elves or something, maybe going about some secret business, but what I saw was nothing at first. We had a couple of milk cows, Clarabelle and Greta, and Clarabelle was standing off to the side by the door. She was making that bawing sound that cows always make when they're in distress, and her calf that she'd had a few days before was making a similar sound as it looked for its milk. I didn't know what they were doing at first, but as my eyes adjusted to the light, I soon found out. They were suckling at the cow's udders, their little teeth leaving long, jagged marks on the flesh. The cow was screaming as they did so. I was surprised, I suppose, because the next thing I knew, I had tipped backwards and was falling off the back of the barrel. I must have made a lot of racket, because as I sat up and rubbed my head, I saw something looking at me from beside the shed. It was one of those things, and even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew it was staring at me. We just sort of looked at each other for a few minutes, neither of us saying or doing anything, and then it let out this strange keening noise and started chasing after me. It was small, barely coming up to my ankle, but it was so strange looking that all I could do was run. I ran flat out for the house, afraid that the others I saw would be after me too. I just knew somehow that if it caught me, my parents would never find my body. That thing would kill me in a matter of seconds. They didn't catch me, obviously, but I remember when I slammed that door behind me, my dad looked up from his morning paper and looked madder than hell. You didn't slam doors in my dad's house, not unless you were looking to catch a beating. But when he saw my face, he must have known what I had seen. He just scooped me into a hug and told me it was okay and that I was safe now. I tried to tell him what I've seen, but he just shook his head and said it didn't matter. He said they couldn't get me and that I was safe. I had to believe that he had seen them before. Especially, he acted. I can't imagine why anyone would let those things live so close to their house. But I suppose we didn't have much of a choice. They're older than the forest. They're older than anything. And they endure. One day, God willing, you'll have to decide what to do about them. But I suggest you make peace with them. They've seen so much come and go, and they never go anywhere. That was many years ago. Now I work on the farm that my grandpa tended so lovingly. He's been dead for nearly a decade, but I never forgot what he said about those little creatures that live in the woods. I still find the Mucklow around the farm sometimes, and now I'm a little more careful to leave them alone. I tell my kids not to go near them either, and for the most part, they listen, though they've never told me if they've encountered the little devils. Grandpa was right about one thing. Whatever these creatures are, they're not going anywhere, and it's best to just get used to them. Otherwise, you might find out how sharp those teeth are as you go out for your morning milking.
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do. and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.